Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, distinguished guests, our speakers, members of the Chamber of Commerce, sponsor, patrons. I'm delighted to welcome you here for the first event of Open Talks. It's a series, so we'll try to do it quarterly, and we'll see what happens anyway. Expect the unexpected. I have to say that we try to encourage dialogue, constructive, hopefully, but we don't take sides, of course. We are very lucky tonight. We have, I'd say, exceptional speakers and an exceptional moderator. So let me go through very quickly the bio. Anyway, you'll see the bio on the site. And it's probably, I may forget something, but just very quickly. So Dr. Allan Zeman, one of the most successful and creative entrepreneur in the region, based in Hong Kong since many, many years, and chairman of the Lan Kwai Fund Group, chairman of Paradise Property, chairman of WIM, and sitting in many boards in listed companies in Hong Kong and China, and among them we can list Fosun, who is the licensor of the BioNTech vaccine, imported in these days, then TVB Per, we all know it, and many others. Sino Properties anyway, but I wouldn't list them all. And Dr. Zeman, something quite relevant, has been serving throughout his many, many years in Hong Kong, I think over 45 years in Hong Kong, in communities and advising the government in many different capacities. The one that I remember the most is the chairman of the Ocean Park. And I remember in the heydays of the Ocean Park, when Ocean Park was competing against the other one in Lantau. And he's still honorary advisor of the Ocean Park and so many other capacities. So thank you very much, Allan, for being here with us. Dr. Alberto Forchielli, who is very well known in Italy and throughout the world. He lived in so many different cities. I hope I remember some, but I can't see very well. Anyway, he's Harvard graduate, he's a renowned economist. He was serving in many capacities from state-owned enterprises from Italy, advisor to the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and last but not least, is an author. And he published several books, including education lately, but mostly economics and foreign affairs. So thank you, Alberto. He was passing by Hong Kong. He was resident in Hong Kong, and it's a pleasure to have him here with us. While Hong Kong is still, unfortunately, a bit closed and suffering restrictions. Dr. Giuliano Castellano, who is one of the pride of our Italian community, an outstanding academic serving in Hong Kong University at the moment in the Faculty of Law. He specialized in international finance law. He served in many universities, such as Warwick University, participating in the training of the Bank of England and London School of Economics. At the moment, he is in Hong Kong, and I have to say he serves his profile is quite complicated. Honestly, I can't remember it because it's not a list of combat. And anyway, it's a pleasure to have him as a moderator. So without any further, I would ask you to join me in welcome our speakers to the stage. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ivano, for organizing, putting together such a wonderful event. I'm genuinely thrilled to be here, and not only because, well, I mean, seeing so many people live and not looking at them on a Zoom screen or something is actually already giving us the impression that we are seeing the light at the end of the pandemic tunnel. But mostly because actually I'm here with two amazing people, two amazing persons. It was a real pleasure and lots of fun actually to work with them and talk about this event. And so therefore actually I want to have this opportunity to share these with everybody in this room. Now, I have to do a couple of housekeeping things, and then I will actually move on and let our speaker actually comment on a number of issues. The first thing is that masks should be kept on all time. We are on the stage, so apart from us, but please do remember to keep your mask. Mobile phones should be set on silent mode, and we will take questions, some questions maybe also during as we are presenting, but I will tell you more about that in a second. Whenever you want to make a question, please kindly introduce yourself so we know who you are, and so actually this is make it more like a real dialogue, even if we are respecting social distancing. Finally, we are on live streaming, and this is for our guests that couldn't come here, and especially those that are overseas. So, as I was anticipating, tonight we're going to have a dialogue. This makes me very happy because my role is going to be very minimal, and actually, then I realized that the more I shut up, the better it is. So but we will have two main block of questions, and that I will give to our guests. One on Hong Kong, and the other one more on China. After the first maybe block of question, we can take maybe some question from the public, depending on how you feel. But without further ado, let's start immediately with the first set of questions for Hong Kong. And maybe I will address first Allan. So we're living in a turbulent time, right? We have there is a number of geopolitical shift, changes, and different things are going to happen. At the same time, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. So overall, I guess the many here in this room know that the West tend to be quite preoccupied what is going on in Hong Kong. Well, I guess the first question is that, do we care about the negative views, or should we actually communicate better? Over to you.
It's a very good question, obviously. And the one thing for sure, we must care about what the rest of the world thinks of Hong Kong, because Hong Kong always has had a very good brand name, trusted in the world. That's why we had the business that we did. That's why Hong Kong was built. We don't have natural resources in Hong Kong. Basically, it's a service industry, financial center. And financial center means you have trust from many, many other countries, people around the world. I think that obviously, unfortunately, Hong Kong has been caught in this web at the moment. You have US, who came through a very turbulent presidency when Donald Trump was there, totally changing the whole feeling of the United States towards their friends, the foreign countries. He was America first. We don't need NATO, we don't need WTO, we don't need anything, America. And so really tarnished the brand, the US brand, around the world. Biden now, of course, is trying to fix it. Unfortunately, in politics, when they started worrying, because Hong Kong, the rise was coming, the economy, I've been in China for 45 years. I had my first office in Hunan and Changsha 45 years ago. And I saw the changes that took place up to today. China is a rising superpower in the world. And so I think that what's happening is Hong Kong is a relative. Hong Kong is a relative of China is one country, two systems. We are part of China now. And so the US and many of the democratic countries, the foreign countries, are now worried about the rise of China, worried about US is now, Biden has even said it, he's worried that US is fallen behind and we're going to make up. They're passing quickly many bills. One just got passed yesterday between the Democrats and Republicans that we can now spend $170 billion in order to catch up on technology and all things that they feel they've neglected because we must catch China. Hong Kong, on the other hand, who they really don't care about, at the end of the day, they care, but not really. China is really the big bad wolf to them. And so, but Hong Kong, we are one country, two systems. Why not try to hurt Hong Kong, as Trump did originally by cannot make any made in Hong Kong goods anymore. Everything has to be made in China because we're not a separate entity anymore. All these things, you know, trade, took away some privileges in trade. So these things were things that we really wound up being thrown in with what's going on at the moment. But I'm still very optimistic that I've seen this many times. I've been at this movie many times. I've said this. I was here during Tiananmen Square. It was the death of Hong Kong. I was here in 1997, death of Hong Kong. People were leaving. Many people were worried. People came back. I was here during the Asian financial crisis, death of Hong Kong. Occupy Central, same story. 2019, the protests, that was really bad, but same thing. Well, it's now, and now we have COVID-19, but it's now 2021, going on to 2022 soon. Hong Kong is still here, stronger than ever. And there's other things, I'll let the other speaker speak, but I could go on and on. There's many great possibilities, great things for Hong Kong in the horizon. I'm happy to answer that in another question.
And and we are very keen to hear also that part. But Alberto, what is your take in this image of Hong Kong that is going outside? And what is do you think we can communicate better? We should communicate better. And what we should communicate. You also saw lots of changes in Hong Kong in the past years. You've been here for a while.
No, I've always been very positive on Hong Kong, and I still am very bullish on it. Now, if I can make a comment, I think the Hong Kong government should hire a PR firm to tell the world, I mean, that everything is okay. There's no effort being made in that regard. Not that the world is too concerned. I mean, there's a much deeper concern over Taiwan now. It's moving. Hong Kong is sort of like being gradually forgotten. But I think the Hong Kong government should make a conscious effort to display some effort in that regard. I mean, as far as I know, I have never read a statement. I never read anything. I mean, I should maybe get the page of the Financial Times to explain the situation, to say everything is all right, or do things, or organize a symposium, organize some chat, and get some testimonials, and pay some editorials. And I always felt that they should do that. For example, the UK. The migration from Hong Kong into the UK now is the biggest migration the UK has ever experienced over the last 50 years. So it's something to be managed. I mean, there are quite a number of people, there are many, maybe 40, 50,000 live in Hong Kong because they're worried about this new security law, something like that. And all these people leave an impression. In the UK, this is a case, for example. And that's, in some ways should be managed. Apart from that, I really think Hong Kong is here to stay. Hong Kong has many things, has many faces. Is a Lugano, and for the money, for the business interaction side, is Rotterdam for the harbor side, is Monte Carlo for the beauty and graciousness, because often we forgot to say that Hong Kong is, first of all, is a wonderful city. It's a beautiful city, as most people forget that many times. And also for the financial aspect, Hong Kong is in New York. I mean, for the 4 year out of 5, Hong Kong stock market has been the highest IPO market in the world. So I'm not worried about Hong Kong. I think the world is going through up and down, and we'll have many more things to worry about rather than Hong Kong. Eventually, we will adjust to what went on in Hong Kong. But still, since you ask, I think I give the Hong Kong government a very bad mark. It is true they don't have a foreign affairs arm, so they're not supposed to be knowledgeable in dealing with international audiences. But if they claim to be an international city, they should be able to communicate internationally.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. But
If I can just
go ahead,
add
please.
something, make it a little more interesting, what you say is correct, but but most governments have no idea about PR and have no idea. I mean, they have their PR services in-house, and they do hire some PR firms. But today with social media and everything, no matter what money you're going to spend, whether it's advertising, whether it's whatever, people just don't believe it. Seeing is believing. My experience has been in these kind of situations, as I went through in 1997 and some of the other instances, the proof is in the pudding. Later on, yes, people are going, I mean, where were the British in 1997 with the BNO passports? Why did they suddenly decide, oh, we have to do this? Political. And for those people that are going to the UK, many young people, and there's a lot every year, go to Canada, go to UK, go to Australia. It's normal for Hong Kong. But for everyone that leaves, you have 6 mainland Chinese coming to Hong Kong with money, So it's Hong Kong is going through. We are becoming the one country, two systems. We're part of China, and so I don't worry so much because I've seen it. I've been here for almost 50 years. I've been through it, and this time for sure, Hong Kong will just change dramatically, and so in that respect, I really don't worry. The thing is, with other like the U.S., they have CNN, they have Fox, that broadcasts around the world. The big problem for China and Hong Kong, we don't really. You don't have a channel, and that's a very big thing. I mean, I watch CNN, just because I don't like Fox, but I mean in the morning. But I'm saying, but there's so much propaganda of whatever, and that's basically the strength of the American market, because they have this news program that goes around the world, and the BBC is for the UK. So I mean, we don't have that in China. In the meantime, that's something that hopefully eventually China will learn, because the Chinese community has always been very kind of closed, and they're just suddenly starting to get confidence in themselves coming out, and so eventually that might change as well as they get to be stronger and stronger. But I think that's one of the reasons, and I agree, I'd love for there to be publicity, but it's just really difficult. People don't believe today because there's too much fake news on the internet, and everybody believes whatever's on there. So hopefully we'll see what happens.
Okay, so Alberto, do you want to add anything on that?
No, but Allan gave me a very good idea. I think Hong Kong should make any effort to have his own channel. Al Jazeera has one. I don't see why Hong Kong shouldn't have one. There is a channel, there is CCTV4, which is viewable all over the world, but it's
but
too...
not really. No, I agree. But those channels need some sexiness, and that comes later on. I sit on the board of TVB, so I can tell you we've gone through a very difficult period. We used to be the dominant channel here. It's not an easy business in today's world, because the internet, the phone, the mobile has really killed the media business.
So, but in some cases, action can also speak louder. And for instance, like if we see how the pandemic has been managed in Hong Kong, has been quite successful compared especially to other of the countries that we have mentioned, in Europe. But at the same time now, we kind of feel like we are a victim of our own success, because the fact that actually the pandemic, the outbreak has been relatively well controlled. And now, there is a lower drive to get vaccination and so on and so forth. This has another set of consequences, we all know, that actually feels like, especially for those of us that have the pleasure of traveling, and especially like you, that Hong Kong is a bit slow in opening up to the world. So what do you think about that? Do you think actually that should be a bit more a bullish move on so on and so forth?
Obviously, everybody would like Hong Kong to open up more. We're thankful that the infection numbers were low, thank God. Looking at what happened in India, look at what happened in many other countries, Hong Kong was relatively lucky to go through what we have. And we are a victim of our own success, because people, as we know, did not want to get vaccinated because the numbers are low. What do I need to get vaccinated for? And the big problem with the reason borders have been kept closed, Carrie Lam, chief executive, really wants to open the border as quickly as we can. It's not Hong Kong's side, it's the China side. China has told Hong Kong, first it was you must get 30 days of zero infections, which we did. Now they're saying we need vaccination. We need at least 50% of the population vaccinated. And so at the beginning, no one was getting vaccinated, very few people. Now, of course, the government has decided incentives. You see Sino and what I sit on the board and China's estates have put a flat on the market for worth 10.6 million Hong Kong dollars for a lottery, and many of the other companies are now coming out with lotteries because the government Carrie Lam was insistent, no government money. Let the private sector handle this. In the end, they are now stepping up to the plate because everybody wants to see the border open. I myself am the chairman of WIN in Macau. I haven't been there since I've been outside of Hong Kong since February a year ago, over a year and a half right now. Everything is by Zoom. And so it's difficult, but China is worried. With 1.4 billion people, China is worried if they open the border to Hong Kong and we allow many, many people to come into Hong Kong, that then they will travel to China. And we saw what happened with India. With 1.3 billion people, it's a huge mess. And I hope none of you have a family member that has passed away because of COVID. And I know many, many Indians families. I mean, every family in India has been affected somehow by a relative or someone. It's a terrible situation. China's actually handled the situation very, very well. And of course now they're trying to blame, because political, that it started in the lab and in Wuhan instead of in the market, but whatever, that's another story. But in essence, we have to open up, because Hong Kong economy was not based on a domestic economy. We can see all the empty shops to let, all of the many brands are now going up to China because China's moving very, very well. And so I believe a few more months, now the vaccination rate is going up. We're at 23.5% now, which was before next to nothing. And hopefully before the end of this year, we will be maybe 50, 60% vaccinated, hopefully. And I think that that'll make a big, big difference. That'll give China the confidence to open up the border to Hong Kong. They're stipulating. Also, China itself wants to get vaccinated 70%. They don't imagine that'll also be not before the end of the year, because they're moving very, very quickly now. They started off slowly, but now they're moving very, very quickly. In China, I've got many companies in China. No one wears a mask. It's been business as usual. It's normal. But I understand. You know, I mean, we've been through a very difficult time with industries closing. Bars have been closed for 6 months, you know, and many people went bankrupt, went out of business. I've convinced the government now in the future that if there is an infection in one place, don't close the whole industry. And they agree now. Close that one place for 10 days, sanitize the place, test all the staff, test everybody, then do contact tracing. If everything is okay, let them reopen again. Don't close the whole industry. And the government now is looking at it, kind of have an agreement that in the future, if there is hopefully a fifth wave not coming, that if there is a fifth wave, that maybe they'll just isolate cases.
Well, the virus is endemic. So, Alberto, what do you think we can do actually to open more the economy in Hong Kong?
No, I disagree with Allan on this one. I think.
I'm happy.
But let's go beyond my disagreement. I mean, I have a question for you, Allan.
Yeah.
Why, if Hong Kong wanted to open,
Yes.
regardless of what China says, would Hong Kong be free to do it?
Yes.
Or he has to stay closed because China has to stay closed?
No, absolutely not. If Hong Kong wanted to open, we could. But the problem is, you know, Hong Kong's business is done by an open border. We have, you know, the year before we closed down, we had 65 million tourists coming from mainland China. The shops, Canton Road, you know, I mean, we're not in that business, but Canton Road could not survive. All the branded names, the Italians, the French, you know, all the big brands were dying because no tourists. Hong Kong people cannot support all the shops that were around, and now Causeway Bay, so many shops have moved out, you know, so it's all changing, and so we could open up, but the problem is that we can't open the border with China, and so there's not enough. I also sit on the board of the Airport Authority. I'm the chairman of the business development at the airport. We used to have 100 million passengers a year coming through Hong Kong.
But Allan, let me interrupt you. If you open, you will have all the Chinese will be forced to come down to Hong Kong to do business.
No, but then
all the Westerners would be forced.
But
Hong Kong would.
Then they can't go back to China. I mean, then they have to go into quarantine. Yeah, for maybe 3 weeks, you know, and so that's the biggest problem, and that's why I would love to go to China, but again, coming back, I would have now at least they're lowering the thing to 1 week. It'll be 1 week quarantine for the medium and low risk countries. You know, before it was 21 days, but I mean they're starting to relax now, and you're going to slowly start to see. Well, in a conservative way, but in a healthy way for everyone, the border will slowly start to open. I think eventually, you know, at the moment, the other problem was July 1st is the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party in Beijing in China, the birth of the Communist Party. And so China wanted to do everything possible, I believe, it's my own, because the last thing they want is to have infection. It'll be a big event for, you know, for China, for the world, all that. And so I could believe that they were quite strict going up to this event. I'm actually invited to go up, but I'm leaving June 27th. I'm not supposed to tell anyone, but
we'll keep the secret.
We'll keep it a secret. But June 27th. But this is the stringency. 16 days before, I'm supposed to take my temperature before I go. June 27th, I go to Shenzhen, take the test in Hong Kong before I go to Shenzhen. 3 days before, then in Shenzhen, take a test. The 28th, we fly to Beijing, get to Beijing, take a test in Beijing, and then July 1st, have the event, come back to Hong Kong, you know, with the government. And so I'm just saying that it's a big deal for them, and I've been through these kind of things before. They want everything perfect.
Yeah, there is always a balance between protection and overprotection. So, Alberto, you were saying before that you disagree a bit.
Hong Kong had 210 dead people. I mean, I use Italy as a comparison, not because Italy has to be used as a benchmark, because I happen to know Italy well. Now, Italy had 125,000. Italy is 4 times Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So I mean, so 208 cases are like less than 1,000 dead for Italy. It's nothing. I mean, when there is a sick person, it makes the headline of the newspaper. We still have about 2,000 a day in Italy, and we are opening up. We are communicating that Italy is back. We want to have the tourists back. We want to have everybody's back.
Sure.
And that's a breath of fresh air. And I wonder, why can't Hong Kong do the same with such a low number of cases? This is what I'm saying. I understand that China is closed, but if Hong Kong opens up, you can get a lot of tourists. You can have a business back from China anyway, because many people won't be allowed to won't go to China for quarantine, will come to Hong Kong. And
Alberto,
this is...
I'm in your camp, but believe me, I
okay.
would love to be open. I'm not telling them to close it, but I do understand what the bigger picture, which is the border. That is for Carrie Lam. I sit on her economic advisory committee, so we talk about it all the time. And I understand that is the main thing to open up, because the trade with China, the GDP of Hong Kong, everything really depends on China, on our ability to go back and forth to China. Eventually, the border will become seamless between Hong Kong and China, eventually, because the Greater Bay Area. That's a whole other discussion. But I'm saying so I think that we just have to be a little bit more patient. It won't be forever. I mean, but I'm like you. I'd love to listen. My friends tell me all the time, you know, they're leaving. They can't go. Bankers, you know, they can't go. Now the government's trying to set up some rules that bankers will be able to travel. Slowly, we're doing it. You know, the Chinese culture.
Why
is
just
such,
bankers? That's another thing.
well, because
the other people
financial
don't count?
Because financial services, listen, in government, there's no rhyme or reason. Not just Hong Kong, anywhere in the world. You look at your Italian government, it's no different.
I mean, I cannot use Italy as a benchmark of good governance, of course. But still, like having a law allowing bankers to move, and not like CEO of an import-export company.
Because they're trying to do everything to get the economy going again, because financial services is so important to Hong Kong, and bankers have been complaining. They've got to travel because of business and that kind of thing. So I understand, but I say it's a step forward. Listen, Hong Kong people are very obedient. We're wearing masks. We were the first ones. Everybody in the world was looking at us like, oh my God, that's why our numbers, 210 deaths, you know, are so low, because everybody really follows the rules. And that's really a good trait of Hong Kong people. Look at the United States, it was a mess. You know, okay, now suddenly it's open. So I hope when the winter comes that it doesn't go back again. You know, I mean, in summer, you know, with the flu, no one gets the flu in the summertime. In the winter, they get the flu. I'm worried that COVID will come back strong in the winter times. I've talked to many medical experts. I also sit on the board of Sanatorium Hospital. We discussed that as well. Will it affect again the world in the winter time? And again, more people will be vaccinated, and we'll probably need a booster. That's another thing. But I would love it to be open like you. I'd love to go back to the old days that I don't have to put a mask in my pocket.
Okay, so just before opening the floor for question on Hong Kong and this, I want to actually just make another question to Alberto, actually, and first, and then also to Allan. As we're trying to look past this pandemic and looking at the recovery of a virus that becomes endemic, what do you think is going to be the strategic role of Hong Kong in a post-COVID world? How Hong Kong can hedge in reopening the economy?
No, Hong Kong does not need to re-hedge. I mean, there are three legs, at least three legs to Hong Kong economy. One is financial services, the harbor, and tourism. Maybe I forgot something else. I mean, transportation in Hong Kong, transportation at the harbor hub will decline. We all know that. And there are a very, very strong harbor and up in mainland China, and the need for the disintermediation of the stopover in Hong Kong is no longer that necessary, so we will have to live with a less important harbor. Tourism is a huge thing, and as Allan said, all it takes is for the borders to open. So I just have to be patient. I'm not a patient man, but I will follow Allan's suggestion to be patient. And to see the tourists, you have much more at stake than I do in mainland tourists. As far as financial services, the financial service industry has been untouched. So there's been no negative repercussion on the stock market. The stock market has been going gangbuster. Just the IPOs have recently declined a bit. There is a resurgence in New York, but I think that's temporary. There is a flood of mainland company coming down. So this economy just needs to patiently wait for the reopening.
Yeah. But in the meantime, we already have a business idea of happening here, as you were saying, creating also a new broadcast for Hong Kong. So we'll talk later about that. Allan, do you want to add something on that, on the post-COVID Hong Kong?
I think that Hong Kong, obviously, what is the future for Hong Kong, basically? How does it open up? I mean, the future for Hong Kong, for those of you that know, is the GBA, the Greater Bay Area. I mean, that's something that was a plan that China came up with, and that's something that many locals still are not familiar with, and it would have been progressed further, but of course the COVID-19 slowed everything down. This was China designated 11 cities to create a Greater Bay Area. 4 cities, Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou are the 4 key cities. And then you have cities like Zhuhai, Foshan, Henning. You've got 11 other cities that will support these 4 primary cities.
Spieghi che c'è un'altra parte sulla Cina e sugli Stati Uniti, quindi se vogliono parlare di Hong Kong.
Do you want to add something?
No, I'm
so
done.
So
I would actually first open if there is any question on this. Otherwise, actually, we can actually move to the part on China and the U.S. because actually that connects very, very much on also on this latest point. But before actually going to that part of our talk, let's see if there is any burning question now, or we can take it later. So I don't see anybody from the public.
Over there.
Over there. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, I got 2 questions. One is for...
Can you tell your name, please?
My name is Josh. I'm a student of Professor Castellano. And then, yeah, so I got 2...
Be good.
Yeah, I got 2 questions. One is, precisely about Greater Bay Area. One was Allan to expand on that just a little bit more. And then the second one is, with regard to the first question is, how do you see was Hong Kong's position in relation to that? Was it weaken Hong Kong in any sort of way, competition-wise, economic-wise, and all that? And then the second question, is relating to a point that you just raised about was it Hong Kong being obedient with, was it wearing masks? But then, by contrast, Hong Kong's vaccination rate is also low. So, to me, it sounded like, almost like Hong Kong people are more self-serving than obedient in that sense, which is, has good and bad. And then I just want to maybe, pick your brain a little bit about that, about a mentality with public health.
Well, the mentality, Hong Kong people in general, or not just Hong Kong, Chinese people in general are much more obedient than a Westerner. It's 2 different cultures, basically. And Westerners are brought up under a different system, more openness, more democracy, more U.S. is the First Amendment, my rights, you can't tell me to wear a mask, you can't tell me I can't own a gun, all these things. Chinese are different, and obviously because of the success the government has had with the vaccination, with the infection numbers, that's worked in the reverse because many people are afraid. I have many staff that are afraid to get vaccinated because they're not sure. They hear the media saying, oh, this one got affected, this one's in the hospital, this one died, and that causes a panic. The numbers compared to other countries are very, very, very low, but yet that causes a very, very big panic. And mostly is because people, this is a new thing, people have a limited understanding. Alberto, if you...
No, I think if you look at Singapore, Taiwan, China, and Hong Kong, you see that they're all being very successful. This is really the case that Chinese are more obedient, and it's not a question of a particular governance style and so on. Just a question that Chinese are more obedient and more, they're easier to get in line. Unfortunately, as I said, this success is feeding into it's questionable now. I know Allan says there might be cases in the winter, let's see what happens. But I'm here and I'm deciding where to go next. And then I see the US opening and Europe opening, and here I can even go to Singapore. So from my perspective, I'm always trying to find the position and the location in the world where to stay for the next 3 months. From my perspective, the West looks way more interesting. Then maybe by the fall it won't be so. But there I see, like, I have some dates, I have some ideas when things are going to get better. They are communicating to me which dates eventually will be able to go back to the States. When I'll be able to go to Spain, when I'll be able to go to England. So it's the first time in many, many years when I think the West has a leg up vis-a-vis the Chinese world, but where it gives them some perspective. We're talking about short-term perspective, so in the long term,
I think
those be alike.
Do you think actually this is going to impact the competitiveness also of Hong Kong? I think Josh also was mentioning something about...
The Financial Times, there is an article in the Financial Times, yesterday, he said, you know, an international city cannot, or Hong Kong, and why it's not rational for Hong Kong to keep closed like this. He says an international business city cannot afford not to allow face-to-face meetings. It's questionable whether an international city can remain such if it doesn't allow face-to-face meetings. This is, you can easily find it.
Did the Financial Times ever hear of Zoom? I mean, all my board meetings now
I know. I understand.
I'm done by Zoom. No, I mean, and it'll be a change, I can tell you. Even as I have public companies as well, many meetings now, even in the future when things open up, because it's a lot cheaper to do it by Zoom than by flying people, board members over, putting up in hotels, you know, and so, and I know a lot of companies are talking about that as well, all over the world, not just here. But, you know, things change. I mean, normally when you have problems, there's always a solution, you know, and so I agree. Everybody would like to be back to normal. I mean, anybody says they don't want it is not telling the truth. I mean, you know, but eventually there's normal and normal. You know, China's back to normal, but they don't want to let anybody in because, so it's not normal, but yet the people, my staff in China, they haven't worn a mask in ages, and they're doing everything that they've always done.
Yeah, I guess something will stay, but there is also, you know, the idea when actually, where we position ourselves in this, you know, level of precaution. But there was actually another question. I think, Ivano, you wanted to ask something.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to ask Allan, you mentioned that the future of Hong Kong is the integration with GBA. And of course, we all know and understand the opportunity, but I see an obstacle, and the obstacle is the fact that especially younger generation here, they haven't been in China yet. And so my question is, do you see an evolution, a new release of the one country, two system policy to facilitate the integration of Hong Kong into the GBA?
It's a very good question, and that's something that the government and China has been asking because, I'll go to it. I believe we'd be looking at a different one country, two systems. It's in the past, it was Hong Kong looking to the West and really catering more for, rather than China, really catering to the EU, US markets. That was always their strength. Going into the future, the strength will become, Hong Kong will change. I say it'll be one country, two systems, but with Chinese characteristics. Because the Greater Bay Area, we're talking about 1.5 hour radius. Hong Kong to Shenzhen is 14 minutes on the high-speed rail. Hong Kong to Guangzhou is 40 minutes on the high-speed rail. That changes everything. I joke, I say it's quicker for me to go to Shenzhen to go to my house in the south side, And so I think that what will happen, and you're talking about 72 million people in those cities, with a GDP last year of 1.65 trillion US dollars. Hong Kong has 7.5 million people. Many young people fear China, don't want to go to China, but slowly there are now programs for many young people to go work in China for a year, 6 months, 2 years, on contracts, graduates from school. And so it'll slowly take time because, as normally happens with young people, one young guy goes to China, goes to Guangzhou or Shenzhen, opens up a business, becomes a unicorn, and suddenly everybody wants to be like him. It's like Jack Ma or Pony Ma, one of those. So.
This actually allows probably to go to the second part of our talk, and this process of integration of China also cannot actually forget what is going on at a geopolitical level, right? So if you've been discussing that this growing integration, for instance, with GBA, with people from Hong Kong can actually go in to China, to mainland. But there is also a perception between the Westerners and the Western community that actually that maybe they're not anymore that welcome. So the process of decoupling, of many aspects, and the introduction of new tax systems, visa requirements for Westerners, Italian or whoever else going to mainland China, is actually might make someone feel as unwelcome or kicked out. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but this time I ask first Alberto to comment on that.
Yeah. No, if I read the AmCham or the EU Chamber of Commerce statistics and about what executives say about being in China, they're not that rosy. I lived in Shanghai for 6 years. They were like great years, but none of my friends who were in Shanghai with me are there any longer. They all moved out, and some are over here. So there is, there is a perception that maybe we are not as greeted as we used to be. This is, there is, I would like to know what you think here in this room, because, I'm one of those guys, I don't think this is the Chinese century. I think this is the Chinese millennium. That we in the West won't be able to stand this level of energy it's bringing out of China. But many times I wonder whether there's going to be an interesting millennium. It's going to be a gentle millennium. And I'm not convinced it is going to be such.
Why so?
Because we feel that we are afraid that some values that not necessarily, we sort of like our values in the West. We know that democracy is flawed. We know that our politicians are a laughingstock, but still we would not like to go for a less democratic system. And we think that the values that emanates from this enormous power coming out of China is not necessarily in the direction of a democratic system. I personally don't feel that China carries with it the soft power equivalent to what the US brought all over the world, with all these defects, by the way, no question about it. But the US brought Hollywood, brought the Burger King, the John Wayne of this world. I'm not sure that I don't see the same levels of soft power emanating from China. So I wonder whether that is going to be corrected, is going to be the norm, whether we should be worried.
Well, I mean, I turn to Allan. Alberto mentioned also soft power, and there is.
I mean, for me, like, I understand the fear, you know, but again, the world, there's now two different systems in the world. There's a democratic system, the Western world, which most of us grew up with, and then you have, and as I say, I've been here, have a Western face, but I actually changed my passport in 2008 to become Chinese. And so, because I saw the changes taking place in China. If you look at the different systems, the problem is most of the Western countries think their system is the best. Whether you're in Italy, the Italians think they have the best system.
No,
Okay,
no, we don't think we have the best.
I'm joking, but I mean, you know, in general, you know, U.S. has 800 military bases around the world. China has 3. You know, so U.S. tries to export what they believe in, and nothing wrong with it. You know, but I see in China, before the old days, Cultural Revolution was terrible, and they've gone through tremendous changes. But if you really go and you lived in Shanghai, you know and Shanghai is one of the great cities in the world today. It's a wonderful city, one of my favorite actually. And so, if you look at China today, 6 months ago, there's a survey, and originally there's been 90% of the people in China love their life, love China, love the government, love everything about them, and they now look down upon the West. In the past, it was different. Everyone looked to the U.S., the American dream. Everybody wanted to go to the U.S. and send their children there. Today, there's a different feeling in China. They're getting much more respect. In the old days, if you had a Western face, they thought you're a genius, and everyone was subservient to Westerner. Today, it's a totally different world. And so they feel they really have more power. And really, if you look at where that came about in Alaska 2 months ago, when Anthony Blinken was in Alaska and was with the 2 Chinese ministers, Wang Yi and Yang Jiechi, in the past, Blinken came out first time and started to give the lecture about human rights and this and that and all the other stories that U.S. and they stopped them, first time ever. And they spent an hour each with an interpreter, and they speak perfect English actually, but with an interpreter to really tell him, you don't tell us now what about our country. Fix your problems first. And it was the first time they came back, everyone in China I see a change taking place, strength in China. China's changing dramatically. Remember they were a closed society. They're now opening up more and more. And in their system, because their system, they're able to bring the people from 640 years, 600 million people were taken out of poverty to a middle class today, double the size of the United States. So something about the system does work, you know, and people in general are happy. And so, yes, you can't have too much freedom, and I used to be the other way, but I realized too much freedom brings you a mess like you have in the U.S., where you have real divisions. People don't believe the president was elected fairly. You have groups like Antifa and Proud Boys and QAnon and all these things that, to me, this was never the United States. But it's gotten to the point, it's like the social media on the internet. It's really caused so many problems for so many people because it's too open, too much. And so I don't really think that it's two systems in the world. And the sooner that everyone can recognize, which probably will never happen, that respect each one's system and don't try to change the system, and be more open, I think that then the world will be a much, much better place, and we can worry about climate change and all the other things that really are killing the future of the world. And so these are things I believe that really are very important to the future, you know, and China-U.S. relations.
Alberto, do you want to add something on that?
See, it worries when you say that 90% of Chinese look down at the West, which is what
I don't say 90%. I said there is a perception now in China that many people who used to respect the West are now, because of what's happened.
I thought I understand you said 90%.
No, I said 90% of the people say that they love their government and they love China. And there was a survey done. Now it's 86%. It was 90 at one time. But you can check the facts if you're an economist. But maybe you can check the facts, and that's exactly what's happened. So, and I'm in China, and I have companies there. I see it. I feel that. I feel my staff. They have a different perception, and that'll help Hong Kong eventually as more and more people go as people who've never been to China and hate China and always think the old days of communism and whatever. China's the furthest thing from communists today. They have capitalism. You look at Alibaba, look at Tencent, look at JD.com, all the companies in China that are billionaires today. And very, very big ones. And then, of course, the middle and lower class are socialism. And it looks after, not unlike Europe, where you have mostly socialism with capitalism, and that's what's built them. The United States is different. The United States is really about capitalism, and that's why the middle and the lower class really are suffering now.
So yeah, I mean, I like to pick up this point actually. So ultimately, it's true. Like we need to learn to actually, the point that you raised earlier, we need to learn actually somehow to accept that we're living in a complex world with different systems and actually tackling what are global issues, global problems, starting from a pandemic to actually reaching, let's say, climate change. But now we are, and also that's the title of our talk, in a moment where there is actually a superpower, a struggle between superpowers. So how is going to end that? And, you know, I don't know what is it, because how do you see that this current struggle, this current tension, is going to actually I don't know, resolve, fade, or become something different if we want to be optimistic, and then actually, you know, having a more acceptance, or I don't know, in the short term, we have to live with this rhetoric or different things. What's your take, Alberto?
No, I think, no, I said it earlier and I repeat it now. I think this is not the China century. This is the Chinese millennium. I'm already 65, so in theory I should not worry about it, but...
You're going to live till 150.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Yeah.
But, no, for a long time, the West has written China a blank check. There was a great hope, even in the States, that China would eventually develop, open up, and so on.
Sure.
I mean, China got a lot of investment in technology, got a lot of investment from the West. We can now say he enjoyed like a free and stable trading system for which it could prosper. It could grow up maybe $3 trillion in exports, maybe now China has. I mean, you know, the world has been open to the development of China. We in the West did not try to stop that. Of course, we got a little disillusioned. We were hoping to be a more gracious China. We are hoping to be maybe a more articulate China. Maybe we were hoping that China would stop stealing technology. And technology theft is still rampant, for example. We were hoping to have a peaceful East Asian Sea, but the East Asian Sea is not necessarily peaceful. It's not the U.S. fault. The Taiwan is an issue. There's still 23 million people there that are not necessarily keen to join. China has an issue with Vietnam, has an issue on the island of the Philippines, has an issue over the Himalaya with India, has an issue with Malaysia, has an issue over Natuna with Indonesia. So it's not necessarily peaceful. And for many, many years, we were happily trading, and many people like me said, we should accept the differences. China is 1.4 billion people. We can expect them to be a massive democracy like we are. But now, things are changing. There's no reason for China to steal IPR, because now China itself is a technological powerhouse. Why so much stealing going on yet? I mean, looking from the U.S. perspective is a disaster. So now, there's the G7 starting today. Biden is arriving in Cornwall. And on top of the table, there is the issues how much further should be closed to China. For example, China has been a tremendous foreign investor over the last 5-6 years in terms of foreign direct investment. I mean, at some point, the foreign direct investment reached, in the US, around 150 billion, probably have 150 billion in Europe as well. But to what extent can we afford a country like China who doesn't really buy into our system, who doesn't really, in some way, start looking down at us, at our values? How can we afford China to have such a huge investment into our countries? When you accept a country to have a tremendous investment imprint in your society, you have to keep for granted that you will have an imprint on your social fabric as well. You can't, to what extent can we accept a country with such different values to have such an imprint? So we are closing down on investment. Europe as well is closing down. To what extent can you spend to have a technological exchange if technology gets stolen? To what extent can you accept 100,000 Chinese students, and then if the subject of discussion in Western university gets shifted? Because if you're not allowed to talk about Tiananmen or the Cultural Revolution anymore, if you have too many Chinese students, they have such an impact on the university budget as well. Because you get to a point where you have like 30% foreign students in US college, they all pay full fees, so college students represent more than 50% of the total budget. I mean, what can we, and the largest population of students in the US is Chinese, 350,000 altogether. Can we accept PhD in terms of STEM technology? Can we accept PhDs that get deep into MIT and get into MIT database and eventually go back to China taking all the files with them? These are all questions. Should we become selective even in terms of visa? Close down on technology, close down on people, close down on investment. Then we get into trade. Trade is an issue. It's not, the US put up tariff on, Chinese exports are penalized by about, what, something 30% tariff?
25, yeah.
25. It's humongous, but is it necessarily bad? First of all, the US is enjoying a tremendous windfall out of those. It's about like maybe Chinese export to the US could be what, 300 billion?
What's that?
300 billion?
Which?
US import from China is more than 300 billion.
Yeah, more than 300.
300 billion by 25% is enormous. Is all of that is 75 billion worth of import duties, but probably import from China even more. So Trump moved to put tariffs. I despise Trump, but I think that move was gracious. When I met Bob Lighthizer, the trade czar, Trump, he said, I'm very glad I met him at the end of his mandate, and he said, look, Alberto, I'm very happy to leave because I know one thing is going to stand. I'm going to leave this country with China tariff in its place, and nobody's going to remove them. And they're a windfall for us. Also, when you deal with trade, there is a security thing. When you deal with trade, there is a security, a political, and economic thing. Security, I mean, if the U.S. does not put a limit, at some point the U.S. won't even have steel to buy ships, to build ships. You won't even manufacture motherboard to go into the system in the ship or the submarine. So there is an element of security. Then there's a political element. The U.S., after the war, after the Marshall Plan, was very generous with the country who lost the war, with Italy, with Germany, with Japan. It allowed us to flood the market with goods, and they were not very protective. They were not protected in terms of market, and our economy developed. It was an export-oriented model that the West took in the 50s, very much like the one that Japan and Korea and later China took. And now the U.S. says, okay, we did that because you were allied of us. We were together in a bigger fight, so we felt it was good for us to keep our market open for you. But as regards China, should we let China be our most important import market once we are all convinced now that China is not our friend necessarily anymore?
But on that point, that's actually, thank you very much for pointing this out. But isn't that the paradox of globalization, right? We cannot really cherry pick what we want and where we want to integrate. And even taking the Marshall Plan as an example, some people ex post will say that that was a bad investment from the US side because actually created, we are very grateful and we all the story. But, we don't know that actually if that will be exactly the same, giving so much money after for reconstruction would have been today a strategy that would have been followed in order when Europe then become united and stronger and another superpower. So, but anyway, I leave it there again because I want to hear what Allan has to say.
I mean, Alberto made some valid points, obviously, but some of the things I'd like to correct you on. China's stealing the IPR, the intellectual property rights. That happened, of course, when China was just opening up and their laws were very, let's say, primitive, right? Were not developed. Once Xi Jinping came in and realized the problems, the complaints from the US and whatever, I know for a fact that they've come down really, really, really hard. And any foreign company that does a deal with Chinese companies, and if you have your intellectual property stolen in today's world, cannot happen. So that's an old story that's been going around, which did happen, of course. But China's changing now. They're becoming much more international, and their laws are changing as well, opening up to the world and seeing that it was not right. But in a developing stage, many countries had 36 offices around the world, and so I can tell you, every country was different and different IPR and all kinds of things. So, but that's changing now. I think that what we have to look at is, globalization. I mean, really in that business, we're in the same business before in supply chain management. And the West was always coming to the East, was always coming to China. China was the factory to the world. And basically, that was our business. That Hong Kong had all the trading companies here, and China was our factory. In the old days when I first came here, Hong Kong was the factory, and then they all moved up to China. So it changed, and now China's becoming very expensive, much more digitalized and all that, and so things are changing as well in China. They're too expensive in many cases, and that's going to Vietnam now and other countries for production. But future, which we don't say anything about, is something called trade pacts. You know, and before I get to that, you have the tariffs that you said that Bob Lighthizer so eloquently was so happy that Trump put in. I know Trump for 50 years. I had dinner with him at his first life in Montreal, and we were in the same. I'm chairman of WIN, and Trump, I know him quite well. If the world really knew the real Donald Trump, they'd be very, very scared, because he didn't know what he was doing. Honestly, that's not his thing. He's a self-promoter, and he's very, very good at that. But when he put in that tariff in imports into the United States, the one that pays for that, he was saying, oh, U.S. is making so much money. The one that pays for that is the American consumer, because the tariff goes on, they import the goods, the importer imports the goods. I was in that business, so I know it. Everyone's laughing. And today, most major companies in the United States are asking Biden to please take the tariffs off or reduce the tariffs again, because it's hurting their business. And the manufacturer can adjust to it, you know, by automation, by other things, by really, so they're not as affected as the importer on the other side. And that's something that really is a big, big problem. And Trump just he needed things to keep saying. He didn't understand what he was doing, and nobody in that side really understood the facts of exactly. So I think that going forward, though, we have something that's bigger than everything, because globalization is here to stay, and China's changing as well. They have something coming up called RCEP. And RCEP is a third of the world's trade. It'll be China, all the ASEAN, the 10 ASEAN countries, which make up a big amount, right? You have Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. And these countries, RCEP will control free trade amongst a third of the world's population, basically, and GDP. And so that will be a huge game changer. And now U.S. is trying to look to see maybe they can join. They don't want to, because politically they can't, but it's a very, very big game changer. And so I really believe that, you know, I sat on the board of APEC for many, many years, and I was one of the Hong Kong representatives. So we just always talked about trade and how each country can work together. China realized after the tariffs were put on, they have to change their economy. Xi Jinping, they're very clever. What he said was, in the past, their economy was based on export. That's how they got their GDP. But seeing how the U.S. could kind of just stop them, and Trump did America first, China needs stability. They want to keep the factories working. If everyone has a job, no one causes problems. When you don't have a job, when you don't see a future, you saw what happened in 2019 in Hong Kong, you have problems. And so what China has said is, going into the future, we have a huge 600 million consumer market, local, domestic market. So we can have the locals buying, keeping the factories busy, buying locally. Sure, we'll do export as well, but that is one of the major points for China going into the future, is they won't be so dependent on exports. And if people want to come and buy, because they are still the factory of the world, there's still so many people, you know, I mean, China's great at everything now and what they do. And so they need, and the problem is, the world has changed. U.S. cannot open those factories again. The U.S. consumer, the U.S. worker doesn't want to sit behind a sewing machine, you know. And so it's a different world right now.
It's a different kind of globalization,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, exactly.
So on that note, actually, I want to open the floor. Oh, there is a gentleman over there and a gentleman over there. So over there, well,
Tom.
I think you see them better because I have the lights in front of my eyes.
Federico Bazzoni. I'm working for a Chinese bank, for CITIC. I'm running M&A for one of the largest Chinese banks, as you know. We are very busy right now on a lot of new issue, a lot of bond issuing by Chinese corporates in US dollar. All the takers are hedge fund. Hedge funds are pretty much American, the large one. So the politicians are saying right now there is a battle between China and the US, but it is not real. The real economy is not real. Question to Alberto, question to Allan. Do you think new technology or new vaccine or new medicine coming from China will make a difference? In other words, will you, Alberto, as an investor, buy technology coming from China? And even Allan, do you think the rest of the world will consider China as a third world in terms of technology? They will not invest into China. And there will be, in this case, a lot of discrepancy between the financial markets and the real economy. So the question pretty much is if you put your money into China and into new technology coming from China. Technology, I mean medicine, or I mean whatever.
Let's go for a quick answer here.
Federico, I would love to, but Chinese buy their own technology and pay such high multiples that it's very difficult for us to invest. The answer is simple. Yes, I would, but I can't. Because it's really overpriced, in my view. And then you see, maybe I was wrong, but it takes a Chinese to understand the Chinese when it deals with technology. We used to invest a lot in China. We don't invest anymore because you have to be Chinese. They have their own set of multiples. They have their own set of parameters. They're not easily understandable for us. They are more comfortable in investing in Western technology. They're wonderful. We see them now. I'm involved with MIT. We see them in the US. Chinese are marvelous about shopping technology in the West. So the opposite is very much, you will see that Chinese technology is 95% financed by Chinese. And the Western technology is 40% financed by Chinese. And that to me is a problem.
Allan, what's your take?
If we like it or not, there's 1.4, the market is so big, 1.4 billion people, and the market is so big, and more, and becoming more so successful. You work for a Chinese bank, so you know what's going on. I mean, Hong Kong stock market, you know, in the past, the index was made up of Hong Kong companies. Today, 80% of the index is mainland Chinese companies, and all the money with Bond Connect and Stock Connect and all that is, you know, from China. It's just more and more is coming into the Hong Kong market. And so I believe that when you say people around the world would you buy Chinese companies, whatever, but there are some companies that have now, you know, DJI, the drone company that was developed in Shenzhen, around the world, became the largest drone maker around the world. Started actually, young man, went to University of Science and Technology in Hong Kong, couldn't get arrested in Hong Kong, so he went to Shenzhen and developed a very big company that everybody is buying. Huawei is another company that's gone around the world, and obviously because of politics, because of 5G, people were very, very nervous, you know, because US was worried they didn't have 5G, and they were 2 or 3 years behind China, so they made up the story that Huawei is going to spy on, and so don't buy, you know, so it became political. But there's still, Alibaba now has gone around the world, you know, TikTok is huge in the United States now, you know, and Biden's just allowed it again, allowed WeChat in the United States. So, you know, to say more and more people, because politically, yes, people say, oh, China's bad and, you know, for their people, but slowly, when they come out with a great product, people don't care where it's made, you know, and so they buy. And before, you know, made in China, in Hong Kong, made in Hong Kong, made in China, was a great label in the clothing business. It was very, quality was great, it was excellent. And so I believe that the world is going towards, it's becoming closer and closer, and I believe China's products will excel all over the world. The same as U.S. is not closing down, as Alberto said. There's many great companies in the U.S. that are very, very innovative, whatever, but China is now becoming very, very innovative on their own. They now have the largest automobile market in the world because of the size of the population. It's number one.
And now the U.S. is closed to Chinese investment.
What? Yeah, yeah, because they worry, because the problem is, it's wrong, because they worry that China is going to take over our economy and they want to shut out, and they don't really, many of those political leaders that have make decisions in the United States and other places have never been to China. They still remember. It's like, as I say, as a kid, I grew up to say, oh, communism is bad. It's not communist anymore. It's changed. It was, when I was there early, it was communist, but it's changed. It's more socialistic, but yet capitalism is very much accepted. And so I just see I look at it from a different angle with different colors.
Let's get a couple of other questions. So there was a gentleman over there.
Yep. Chinese University of Hong Kong. So we have spent a lot of time today speaking about the struggle between China and the US, but we are at an event organized by the Italian Chamber of Commerce from a European country. And I think Europe is a very important power nowadays. And in the last years, the relationship between Europe and China has been quite important. As a reaction to Chinese investment, Europe just established a new investment screening mechanism, which is something similar to CFIUS. But on the other hand, Europe also signed a treaty, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, with China. So I would like to hear the opinion of both speakers, how these two major changes in the positioning of EU towards China are going to affect the trade and investment relationship between the two countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if other questions in the meantime, if you can raise your, over here, in the first row, over there as well.
Yes, good evening, Tom Gnocchi. I'm the head of the EU office here in Hong Kong, so maybe I can follow up the question there. I haven't been here too long, but one of the surprises that for me in coming to Hong Kong is actually the size of the European business community. Obviously, a large part of it is the Italian business community. But there are around 1,600 European companies, and that's the largest group after mainland Chinese companies in Hong Kong. So this is I think a very, very strong point for Europe in Hong Kong. There are other big interests which Europe has in Hong Kong. But and Alberto touched on some of these issues, but there have been some pretty big political changes over the past year in Hong Kong. And that would be my question, how this is affecting the future of European business. Obviously, it's very, very complex in that you have many factors. You have COVID in the middle of all of this. But Allan also mentioned the mainlandization of Hong Kong, which I think is a fact. So the question would be how are these political changes affecting the business community, the European business community? And might we see, on the one hand, companies go more to the mainland in the future, and those who are affected, for example, by the rule of law, data security, these issues, maybe pull out of China and Hong Kong altogether. So it's a question which we're looking very carefully at. Then to touch on the wider EU-China, the comprehensive agreement on investment was mentioned. And just to say that there's now been, I won't go into the developments there, but there have been complex issues which effectively put the ratification on hold. I won't go into this. But just to mention that this was not a classical negotiation of meeting halfway in the middle, because the European market, and again, I think Alberto mentioned this, the European single market has been very, very open to Chinese investment. And this was not the case in the other side. There have been big restrictions. So the CAI was aimed at rebalancing this relationship. And I think in that sense it goes hand in hand then with the investment screening measures which have been recently introduced. So, but my question was on more specifically on Hong Kong and how you see the future for European business. Thank you.
I guess we can take these two questions together because are very much related. Please.
Please, Allan.
And then there was, can you please also pass the mic over there?
Okay, why don't we answer these questions first?
Yeah, sorry.
Otherwise we'll forget them. I think that you make some very valid points, but I can tell you both Hong Kong and China love Europe. We can see the trade between the two countries, and again, you're new here, you haven't been here for a long time, but I've watched the European communities really, really grow. Italy, I've got 3 Italian restaurants, by the way, in Hong Kong, but I mean Italy, Germany, very, very strong, the UK, very, very important markets, both for China and Hong Kong. I believe that before we had a problem here with, at one time, Hong Kong was here, China was here. We had a problem with LegCo, the Legislative Assembly. You know, a legislative assembly, LegCo, is like the engine in a car. When LegCo is, when the engine is broken, the car doesn't move. What happened was that LegCo had divisions, the pan-Democrats, the anti-Beijing group, and then the pro-Beijing group. And every bill, LegCo is the only thing that can help the people of Hong Kong, bills to get passed. And every bill that came up took 3 months for filibuster. It was a new word that I learned. Everything the pan-Democrats had to show for their side that we have to filibuster everything. We can't pass this, we can't pass. It was just to help the people, more land, more housing, more things that Hong Kong really suffers from. And this was all blocked for political kind of reasons. And this really divided the community. And so I believe that now China realized after the protests, everybody was taken by shock, because in all my years, I'd never ever been through anything like this. When I was a young boy growing up in Montreal and Canada, we went through separatism, and the French wanted to separate from the rest of Canada and Quebec. At that time, we had bombs going off in the city. I was a young boy, I almost got killed because a bomb went off. So I remember very, very quickly, but this was really, really very, very serious in Hong Kong. Never before happened. And so China said, look, we need to wake up. And we need to stop this. We need to settle down, because one country, 2 systems was not really working. China believed one system comes first. Hong Kong people believe 2 systems comes first, because after '97, it was a mess. Nobody had an identity. We didn't know who we were. We didn't know what we were. Some people didn't know if they're Hong Kongese, Chinese, British, American. It was a total mess until China decided, and in 2003, we're supposed to pass the Article 23, which was our security law. But at that time, everybody was feared China, didn't know China, and so there was a backlash against it, so they dropped it. No chief executive up until now, last year, had wanted to pass the security law. Out of 200 countries in the world, and you know, all your EU countries have, most of them have security law, 123 have security laws, 120 have security law. What's wrong with Hong Kong passing one security law? But for political reasons, everybody bashes it. Now with the system, the LegCo system changing, which remains to be seen how it works or if it works, I believe that it unlocks the engine again. It fixes the engine. Bills can get passed, as we see. The Pan Democrats just the last few months have walked away from LegCo, whatever, or putting up a protest because they believe in a different system is fine. But at the end, people were suffering. People living in subdivided flats in Hong Kong, in caged homes in a place like Hong Kong, is that fair? 6 families, because of the laws from the British that passed through to Hong Kong after they left, with land auctions, that people are living in tiny little shoe boxes and paying crazy numbers. That's not a life. And China realizes that. They want to get back. They want to force the government to really start letting people live, not in a negative way. They want everybody to live like you do in Europe and the United States. And so I think that they love the EU, the European countries. I mean, that's very, very important to China, to Hong Kong. All, as you mentioned, how many European countries are here. It's very, very important. The big thing is because the market, as I said, was in that business, 1.4 billion people, everybody wants to do business there. That's why Elon Musk opened up Tesla, against the US. Oh my God, how come you opened up in China? It's a developing market, a huge market, and it's great for European companies because the consumer, they love Europe. They love, listen, all your brands. I mean, that you have between Louis Vuitton, between, all the famous brands. It's incredible. So I believe that'll just get stronger and stronger. Don't worry so much about system, whatever. That will continue. As I say, we don't have time, but the Greater Bay Area will change a lot of things. Hong Kong, the importance of Hong Kong, because the head office won't just move to China because we have the common law system and independent judiciary. Judiciary is not changing. Teresa Cheng, who's the head, the Chief Justice, no way she wants to change. She's very sane and she knows very, very well. She wants to keep the independent judiciary. And China they need Hong Kong. They need a place like Hong Kong because they pass so much money through here, and we're the gateway to the West and also the gateway to the East. So they need the middleman. Hong Kong will always remain that way. And even in the Greater Bay Area, China has a civil law system, which is different. And most countries in the world have common law. And so that's why Hong Kong is so trusted. Believe me, as I say, I've been here, I've seen so many things. And all those people that are always worried and look at the negative side don't do well at the end. Many pull out and whatever. The ones that look at the positive side do very, very well and continue.
Thank you, Allan. So, Alberto, what do you think with this view between China and Europe?
Yeah, I think, Dini, is it you? Was it you asking? Dini, the Euro position will not reflect seamless what the US position is. In Europe, there are very large constituencies like Germany that flourish on trade and investment with China, and Germany is not going to let that go. However, in some areas, you can see common position between US and Europe. I mean, to make it clear, the global world is made of flows. What made the world global is like that there is this free flows of people, investment, ideas, data, goods, finance. These flows goes, in a perfect global world, this flow go free and go east, west, west, east freely. Europe and the US will coordinate how to stop investment flows. Investment flows will not be that free as they have before. They will also coordinate on how to control people flows. People, I mean high-tech, STEM people flows into respective technologies and market. Now, for example, the US is just approving $250 billion to counter China. They all will be mostly spent in new technology. This is the only bipartisan thing that the US Congress can conceive. These will be like investment projects, high-tech projects to be financed. You cannot expect like Chinese graduate students to be involved in those. And you cannot expect Chinese graduate students to be involved in European financed projects. After the bad experience done with Galileo, which is the GPS European system that was initially jointly developed by China and the US, where China was invited to co-develop. So Europe and US will coordinate on people flows. They will coordinate on data flows. Not necessarily coordinate, but data already being blocked. Data stay in the country where they belong. So the day of data flowing freely is finished. Where the positions are different are on the goods flow. You will not have a coordinated position. I mean, trade, apart from high-tech goods, they will be confined in a different category. Apart from that thing, I think trade will still be free. So it will be like a world similar to the pre-World War I world. There was a basically free world apart from a few categories. And you may expect a Europe which is closer to US position in some ways, except trade.
So I have unfortunately we have to wrap up. If the question is going to be fast and the answer is going to be fast, I'm very happy to actually have the gentleman ask the final one.
I will be very fast. Vittorio Trusso, I'm from the Rigo, the eyewear group in Italian group, of course. Now the question for Allan is, we know Hong Kong, been in Hong Kong for 17 years, so for me Hong Kong is home. So Hong Kong was strong because it was the gate to China. So it was like a comfort zone because it was easy. Everybody has to go into Hong Kong to get to China. But now the world has changed. So now we're talking about the Great Bay Area. So it's not anymore Hong Kong, but it's a bay. So it's competing with Chinese cities, competing with Hainan, it's competing with Guangzhou, Macau. So what has to do Hong Kong to change, to remain strong in the coming? So how we see Hong Kong in 10 years?
I see Hong Kong will be stronger and stronger. I mean, because even, as I say, we're going from 7.5 million people to 72 million people. That's number one. Talking about eventually a GBA passport, and the passport will be in the cloud. I mean, basically, you'll be able to, the flow of people going back and forth. I mean, it's not definite yet, but it's in discussion as the Greater Bay Area becomes big. If you look at Bay Areas, Silicon Valley, one Bay Area, became very, very big. New York, the Bay Area became big. Tokyo, the Bay Area became big. Hong Kong, this Greater Bay Area, the GDP is larger than South Korea. So, I mean, Hong Kong will continue because our branding, because our independent judiciary, because our common law system, which is very important to international companies. You want to be able, if you have a problem, to have arbitration disputes settled here, Hong Kong. So all these things are very, very important. And the government knows that, and China knows that. They're not about to touch that. That's a hands-off. And so I really believe that we still will be the middleman, because when the West understands what the Greater Bay Area is all about, I know from my old business, customers always want to do business. And the reason I maybe disagree with some things that Alberto says is that because that 1.4 billion, it's a carrot. If you're an importer, if you're in technology, whatever, you always look at that huge integrated market with money. And so, and now with RCEP, with what's coming, with the bigger trade, you're talking about a third of the world's population and trading partners, So, I mean, the opportunities, and maybe the Greater Bay Area will be part of that RCEP and all that. So I think that, and the world's looking into TPP and these other conglomerates, but I can tell you, Hong Kong will continue to have its place, and it'll change. As I say, some people will go with the GBA, with the passport to the UK, and some people now, Canada's just came out with some new things because they want only your brains. They want only the top people, the graduates and all that. But as I said, because of what's across the board, we see with the property market, every time a house goes up, it's bought up with cash and all that by property. That will continue more and more. I'm hoping that the problem, Hong Kong, the housing situation, Singapore has 90% of the population owns their own home, because Lee Kuan Yew, when he was alive, realized the house is very important for a human being. He made sure, he tailor-made mortgages to, as you know, you lived in Singapore, to really cater to whatever your salary was so you can buy the house and afford it. Hong Kong, 40% of the population, only that, own their own home. And that's the biggest problem, because in the old days, the philosophy for government here was all market forces dictate. Hands off, government doesn't do anything, just whatever the market forces were. So at the end, you wound up with 6 families that have more money than many GDPs of countries, and not in a negative way, the property developers, you know, because it's still a cartel, you know, and that was from the British days, not from the Chinese. That will change, and that will give Hong Kong people a much better life. Better housing, more land, everyone will live like a human being, and hopefully we can get up to 90% of people owning their own home. That's what Xi Jinping has pushed Carrie Lam now, and in the next election, after the next election, China will be adamant about making the life of the people better. And that's something, and I know people, I don't want to get into all, we don't have time with Xi Jinping and all that, but at the end of the day, all he really wants is to make the life of the people better, and he has already.
Alberto, how do you see Hong Kong in 10 years?
No, I see Hong Kong stronger and stronger. I'm bullish on Hong Kong.
Good man.
Pardon me?
Good man.
Yeah, Hong Kong is right in the middle of financial flows, and financial flows are untouched. As Federico said, in spite of this is a lot of money coming in from the US and investing in Chinese bonds. And more the Chinese government will open up, will have to relinquish capital controls. You will have renminbi in and out. You maybe have a renminbi-based world rather than a US dollar-based world monetary system. And Hong Kong is right positioned, right in there. Right. And that you cannot kill financial flows. So,
right. So I guess
it's a happy day for this room.
Exactly. And on that note, I pass the power to our president.
No, I'll be very quick. I think we achieved our goal. A little chamber such as the Italian, you know, we managed to have 2 outstanding speakers here with us. And we achieved the goal of encouraging and promoting open talks, civilized. We learned very much from you, and also thank you to our Professor Giuliano. Please join me in thanking our speakers and moderators. Thank you. So I close with this note. Thank you very much and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.